The contents featured in this program expresses the personal views of the presenters and their guests and are not necessarily representative of the whole BiPlus community.
Double the colors, double the thrill. I'm painting outside the lines at will. Buys the word, let the anthem play. Every heart beats its own way. I'm feeling alive. It's not a phase, it's how I thrive. It's love I see, not him or her, it's you and me.
Good evening and welcome to the B-Side, Perth's BiPlus community radio show here on DRN1 Radio every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock. Joining me as always in the studio are my two beautiful co-hosts, Bridget and Marie. How are you going?
Good evening.
Hi, thanks for having us.
And tonight we will be talking about being BiPlus beyond the binary, multi-gender attraction beyond gender and labels. It sounds like some juicy stuff we've got to get into tonight.
I think we do, and I think it's something that maybe people don't necessarily immediately understand when they think about the term bisexual. So I think it's something that's really important to actually put out there and, really unpack a little bit. What do you think, Bridget?
Absolutely. But before we get started, as always, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land that we're on tonight. So we are recording on the land of Boorloo, otherwise known as Perth, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians, the Whadjuk Noongar people, and we pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Bridget. So, bisexuality. What comes to mind when we say the word bisexual, do you think?
Well, yeah, I think, when you actually break down the word, obviously you've got bi, which most people will kind of see as being meaning two, and then sexual, so it actually being about sexuality. And what we actually want to look at today is how sometimes that actually does pigeonhole the word bisexuality into being really just about two genders and being attracted to just two genders, and then also it just being about sexual attraction as well. So we're actually going to basically try and overcome those myths because they are myths and look at, how bisexuality is a lot more than just those things.
There are so many people who identify as BiPlus and who exist everywhere on the spectrum, and I think that's what we really want to acknowledge. People who identify as non-binary, gender diverse, intersex, trans, and who are experiencing attraction in so many different kinds of ways. I think a lot of people would be familiar with the Kinsey scale. And the Kinsey scale posited that there was a scale of attraction from 0, completely heterosexual, to 6, exclusively homosexual. Personally, I tend to put myself right in the middle. I don't know about you guys.
I'm actually really high up on that Kinsey scale because I'm much more attracted to women than I am men, which is kind of ironic because I'm currently dating a man. But yeah, I'd be right up there kind of at a 4 or 5. What about you, Aries?
I'm probably closer to the other end. I definitely have a much higher sort of level of attraction to, female or female presenting than I do. But I think as we touched on when we spoke with Chris in our last episode, for me, I think it's very much about safety. I find a lot of comfort and safety being around, women and very rarely find men like emotionally safe to be around. So I can find them physically safe, but not so much emotionally. So, I think by weight of numbers, that puts me sort of attracted to women a lot more than men because it is a very rare thing where I find those men that I feel safe enough with to be both emotionally and physically attracted to them.
But it definitely doesn't put you at a 0 either. You're definitely not heterosexual.
Definitely not heterosexual, no.
But you'd be somewhere probably in the 0, in the 1 or 2, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not highly sexually charged. Like I don't look at men the same way I look at women, I guess. But every now and then I meet a man and I go, oh, because I feel something different in my body and I feel, attraction, sexual attraction. And on very rare occasions, emotional, romantic attraction as well. But it is very few and far between for me. So I would be low. I'd be one or a two.
I've definitely seen you check out some very beautiful men around though.
Yeah,
So it
that's the
does
thing.
happen. Sometimes it can just be, that sort of physical, and aesthetic attraction too, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Beauty is beauty, regardless of the form that it appears to us in. So I definitely do find attraction, but it's limited.
And of course, the Kinsey scale, it's not the be all and end all. This was something developed many decades ago in the 1940s. And the interest of Kinsey and his team was very much about really sexual attraction, very specifically. And I think one of the things that we wanted to get into tonight also is that attraction has those different facets and not everyone experiences it in the same way. So attraction might not necessarily be sexual attraction. It might not necessarily be physical attraction. It might be romantic attraction. It might be a sense of spiritual attraction. And I personally am very interested by people who say that they're, for example, maybe bi-romantic, but not bisexual, or they're heterosexual, but some other romantic. And I find that really, really fascinating because that's quite different to me. I'm quite a physical person, I suppose. So for me, it has to be both. There has to be that physical, but then there also has to be that connection that I suppose is, I don't know, the mind connection, if you want to call it spirit. I'm not really
Emotional
that
connection
kind
maybe.
of person. Yeah, I suppose
Or
emotion.
even romantic connection
Yeah.
as well, because that's when it's sort of you're really seeking out love from that other person.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm.
But I think that other people perhaps separate a lot more, and they might find that there's someone that they can be purely physically interested in, and maybe someone that they're purely emotionally interested in, and that might be split with genders. I think it's really interesting, Aries, also what you were saying about the context of the society that you live in and the sense of safety about men. It makes you wonder if we lived in a different society.
Or even a different culture, different country.
Exactly.
Whether my attraction would be, higher on the Kinsey scale, I guess, rather than lower, because there would be a higher percentage of safe, and therefore attractive to me men available. Because, Aussie men and Aussie culture don't really, I never felt like I fit into it. And so, it is, like I said, it's a very rare thing that I find a guy who doesn't have what I consider to be fairly toxic masculine traits, and therefore, very unattractive to me. Like they're it's a rare thing to find a guy that looks great and feels safe, has meets me on an intellectual level as well as an emotional level, but then a romantic / sexual level as well. It is few and far between.
Absolutely. And I think we always want to think of sexuality and as just nature, right? We're born, that's it. It's this pure, undiluted, natural experience. But it is affected by our environment. It is affected by our cultural influences.
How much is it actually affected by gender though? So is it actually about the person, or is it actually about, how they present and their gender expression and their sexuality in terms of their physical being, like their genitalia as well? Like, are those the things that we're attracted to, or is it about the person?
Great question. And we're all performing gender all the time.
We are.
Yeah, and it's actually a really tricky question for me to answer, because I don't feel like I've been exploring my bisexuality like openly and honestly with myself and with the world around me, like engaging with the world around me as a openly bisexual man for long enough to have had enough experiences to really know yet. Once upon a time, I would have never even thought about, being attracted to a transgender person, for example, whereas now I'm actually looking and I'm going, oh, actually, am I? And in some cases I am, transgender men and transgender women. But again, it's not just about the body they come in. It is about the rest of the stuff that comes with them. So it doesn't matter how beautiful the packaging is. If the contents of the package don't, tick all the boxes as well, then my attraction will only ever be at a purely physical level, like looking at a nice tree. Or a nice piece of art, Beyond that, there's no desire to have it, or to engage with it. It's just, that's a beautiful thing that I enjoy looking at.
I'm just going to jump in for a second and say, Aries, that I thought for a second there you were saying tickle the boxes. And I had a little bit of a visual image,
Like a tickle me Elmo.
something like
I
that.
don't think that's it at all, Marie. But thank you for making that nice and innocent for us. Yeah,
I'm crying.
Whatever works for you. Absolutely. I think it's so funny that we always tend to think whatever era we're in, we've got the answer.
Yeah.
We've reached the end. We think that everyone before us was wrong. Oh, they had these silly primitive ideas, but now we've reached the end point. And we can look back and we can go, oh, when they first started talking about bisexuality, which is, I think the word was first published maybe in the 1800s. And of course, back then it was all about it being a perversion, right? It was an inversion. And that's where it kind of started from as a printed word. And we can look back on that and go, that's ridiculous. It's natural. But we still now, we have these ideas that we think we know it all. And we don't. It's still so complicated. There's so much in terms of people can wax and wane over their lifetime. I think most people who are bi, or a lot of people who would say they move potentially between points on that scale. They're not always static
I
over
think it's
their
actually more about being fluid with your sexual attraction and sexual orientation rather than it actually being, set over the course of your life.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in some situations, I've been very fortunate in that I've had some really explorative and fun, I guess, sexual experiences. And in those moments, I can find myself very engaged and very sexually attracted to, male presenting bodies and genitalia and stuff. But beyond that, you know what I mean? Like it exists in that moment. And so that was, I guess, where I learned that I was bisexual, because I was feeling attraction, I was feeling arousal, I was wanting to engage and touch and feel and taste and smell and, be involved
Tickle?
in it. Yeah, tickle, absolutely. And so like I said, that was sort of the point. I went, okay, I'm definitely not straight anymore. Like something's going on. But then, I think also for me, because I came out later in life where I was much less sexually charged. So I had those experiences in my 20s and 30s, but now I'm in my 50s. I didn't come out till my late 40s. And I look for different things now. Like I'm not looking for sexual gratification in my connections. I'm actually looking for that intellectual and emotional and spiritual connection, probably more importantly actually than the sexual connection. And the sexual connection tends to form after that. So it is, it's interesting, because I think if I'd come out earlier in life when I was much more sexually charged and motivated, things might be different for me now at this age.
You'd have different priorities, perhaps?
Oh, I think the priorities might still be the same now, but I might know a little bit more about myself, because I probably would have explored more, because I had the motivation to do so. Whereas now I'm not, like I said, I'm not so motivated. It's more a romantic connection that I'm looking for than a sexual one.
Interesting.
Marie, what do you think?
I think for me, I guess my sexual attraction, I actually consider myself somewhat on the demisexual kind of spectrum. I'm not
too.
all the way demisexual. I can still certainly find sexual attraction just on someone's physical appearance. I still need to know a little bit about them, and I can kind of act on that, relatively quickly when I do have that sense of safety with somebody. So it's not like I need to have a fully formed love connection with someone before I can actually, be with someone new. But I do find that connection can actually either really ramp up or really wane as I get to know somebody, based on that, I guess, importance that I place on, the emotional connection. And definitely for me, it's also very much intellect and romantic connection. Beyond just the physical side of things, and then that then determines how physically attracted I will end up being to somebody. So I guess it is a little bit different for me than what it can be for some people. But yeah, like I think that does actually change the way that I then I interact with people. But so much of that for me is about who the person is rather than what their gender is.
Sounds like you're talking about safety as well. Safety in being able to develop intimacy, which really reflects back on what you were saying, Aries, and might potentially influence the choice of partners and attraction as well. So very interesting. Why don't we take a little break and we'll come back and discuss this further?
Sounds great.
DRN1, your favorite radio station, playing the independent songs you love right now.
Bye, 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 bye. I'm feeling alive. It's not a phase, it's how I thrive. Bye, 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 bye. It's love I see.
Welcome back to the B-side. Marie, just before the break, you were talking to us about being demisexual, and our producer pointed out that some people might not know that terminology. Would you like to give us a little potted description of what it means to be demisexual?
Yeah, so basically, demisexuality is a sexual orientation where you tend to only really experience sexual attraction only after you've actually formed an emotional bond with that person. So I'm definitely on that spectrum somewhere. Like, as I sort of said, I'm not all the way there. Like, I don't need to have a full love connection with someone in order to be sexually attracted to them. But I find sexual attraction to people changes over time depending on the emotional attraction, which is great for me because when I'm in long-term relationships, I actually get way more horny for that person as opposed to most people, it probably goes the other way.
Can vouch.
Ooh. Thank you very much.
I think while we're sort of touching on terminology too, like maybe sapiosexual as well, do you want to give us a little bit of a rundown on what it means to be sapio as well? Because, we have talked about being attracted to people on an intellectual level, a romantic level, a physical level, a spiritual level. Where does sapiosexuality come into it?
Yeah, so sapiosexuality is where you're actually attracted to someone's intellect. So that's actually more about, I guess, intellectual kind of connection with that other person.
Like, you've got to be able to have a conversation with someone, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, ideally.
You don't always have to.
Depends on the connection, I suppose, Bridget.
It does, and we're all different.
How ticklish you're feeling.
Exactly. That might be a theme of this episode. But Marie, I think it's interesting also because one of the themes, I suppose, that's coming up so far on our show is about breaking down stereotypes. And I think that's very interesting also in relation to you being poly. I think there's quite a stereotype there that people would imagine that someone who is poly, in some ways in the same way that they would imagine someone who's bi, is perhaps hypersexual and that sort of thing. So they might be surprised to hear that you are in fact demisexual.
Yeah, so, and it is a really common, I guess, misconception about bisexuality generally that, it is about hypersexuality.
Polyamory as well.
And polyamory as well. And yeah, like you put that on a dating profile and everyone thinks, wow, that means you're going to want to be having orgies with
Maybe that's why
everyone
I'm getting
you
hit up
meet.
by so many straight guys, because maybe they see the bisexual and the polyamorous thing and they just think that it's a free-for-all.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have any,
Whereas if, but I also go on to say in my profile that I'm like sort of demi and sapio as well, right? But
they probably don't know what that means.
yeah.
How much of the profile do you think they're reading? The first
Well,
the first
sorry,
two
It's a
lines.
very long profile, thanks to Marie, who made me rejig it about a year ago.
I think they just look at your photos and think, that guy's hot.
Yeah, right.
They do say that people swipe very quickly. I read something like 1 second for people to look at a profile and swipe.
Yeah.
So I don't think they're taking a very considered view.
I read everyone, but then I don't swipe right on a lot either. So, yeah.
So being both bisexual and polyamorous, tends to have people believe that we are very focused on sex.
Yeah, 100%. And it's actually probably the opposite of that. I can be a very sexual person, but generally that's within the safety of strong emotional
Established
connection with that
yeah.
person. Yeah. And, that could be multiple connections. That's the whole point of polyamory, is that you can have multiple loves, but it does mean that, I actually need to develop that connection with those people over time. It won't be an instant, I think you're hot, I'll jump into bed with you and you and you and you. That's definitely not the way that I approach dating at all.
Yeah, because a lot of people conflate polyamory, particularly with swinging and open relating and that kind of stuff. They don't realize that it's about a love connection rather than a purely sexual connection. And so, yeah, bisexuality and polyamory put together so it just gives people like an image in their head that you're this hypersexualized person that is going to be probably, looking primarily for sex, as opposed to, looking for things much deeper.
Yeah, you're really at the intersection of those stereotypes. I can imagine that must be difficult. Marie, you had a really nice, speaking of breaking down definitions of bisexuality, you had a really nice definition of bisexuality that you were going to share with us. Is that right?
Yeah, so someone that I tend to follow is the Bi Plus activist Robin Ox. I'm hoping I've said her last name correctly there. And she has a definition of bisexuality as the potential to be attracted to people of more than one gender, not necessarily at the same time, in the same way, or to the same degree. So that leaves a lot of scope for what bisexuality can actually mean. So, like, for instance, for you, Bridget, being in a monogamous relationship, that doesn't mean that, you stop being bisexual just because you are, currently partnered with a man.
Even though many people think that's the case.
Exactly. But, it also means that, that attraction can change over time as well. So, like, for me, I'm in a phase where I'm probably a lot more kind of seeking connections with women than I am men. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, it's always going to be like that. It very much depends on the person that kind of, comes forward, is there. And it's about the person rather than their gender for me. So
I really love that she includes all of that in the definition. First of all, the idea of potential, because it does leave it open to say you don't have to be out there acting on all of this to identify as bi. And we know that many people don't, or they don't at all times in their life. And I also really like, the not at the same time necessarily, not in the same way necessarily, and not to the same degree necessarily. Because I think these are all really common misconceptions. And I really, really think that our lives, they're rivers that flow, right? And
They're fluid, like our sexuality, right? And like our attraction.
Yes, and they're shaped by outside forces. I also think your attraction is often shaped by the person you're with. At least it is for me.
100% agree.
Person starts to become your reference point. And so you might start to find things attractive that you didn't before because of that person. And so you might, I guess, get used to maybe one gender or another gender or something because you're with that person and yeah, it's a very, very interesting question, but it's a good definition. And I think important also to remember that some people that meet that definition wouldn't consider themselves bi, and we also have to leave space for that. Some people would consider themselves hetero-flexible. Some people would
Even homo flexible as well. There's a lot of people who have only ever been in same-sex relationships and then are just recently exploring, relationships with a gender opposite or, different to their own.
And of course, pansexual. Some people prefer that. Some people prefer just multi-gender attracted. And some people just hate labels in general.
Yeah. How do we all actually label ourselves out of interest?
I've wrestled with it for a while, because like when I first, it's really interesting because I thought I had to choose a side, like I thought I was either gay or straight. I didn't realize that there was an in-between. And I thought that the fact that I found men attractive and I'd had sexual experiences that involved men that I'd really, really enjoyed, that at some point in the future, like this switch was going to flick and I was just going to be gay. And, there was no in between. I was either straight or I was gay.
And was that a scary thought?
Yeah, it was, because it was really confusing because I knew that I still really liked women. But I didn't know that there was an alternative. Like nobody had educated me. In any, like my parents hadn't educated me, school hadn't educated me, like pop culture and media and stuff, like nothing had educated me. So I didn't even know that this thing called bisexuality existed for such a long time. I just thought that, I had to choose one side or the other.
Aries, did you always also feel like it, once you did find bisexuality, that it had to be like equal amounts men to women as well? As in, like, you kind of had to be right in the middle?
Yeah, and that's kind of like the next stage of it that I wrestled with. It was like, going back to the Kinsey scale, like what's the difference between bi and gay? Like, if you just like having sex with men but you don't want to be romantic with men, where does that put you on the whole spectrum of things? But I mean, the majority of my experiences with men have been purely sexual. There's only been one romantic connection. I mean, there have been a few guys that I've met that I would have liked to have evolved, a romantic connection with them, into a romantic connection with them, but that wasn't to be. So what I'm left with to gauge my bisexuality level is those purely sexual encounters that I've had. And some of those have been in group situations and some of those have been one-on-one. So, I wrestled with that.
And I think this is one of the things that's really nice about that definition is that, it's talking more about that potential, as you said, Bridget. So it's just the potential for the attraction. It's not actually the actual attraction. It's the fact that you could be attracted to those men if they existed in your sphere, right? So even if you aren't actually attracted to, a specific guy right now, that doesn't make you any less bisexual. You're still just as bisexual because the potential is there.
Yeah. And I definitely have, I guess, and I'm assuming a lot of people might have something similar, like a fantasy human being,
Oh, tell me about that.
Well, if my ideal male presenting, person existed, what sort of physique would they have? What sort of a intellect would they have? What sort of a personality would they have? So I've kind of like got that ideal in my head. But if I never met that ideal, if that never happened, if that never came to be, if I never met a single person that matched or met that ideal and I was in a straight presenting relationship for my entire life, would that mean I'm not bisexual? Not at all, right? Because it's the potential is there. Like, I know in my mind and in my heart that there is absolutely the potential for me to be highly emotionally and sexually attracted to a person. It's just that a person that tickles all of my boxes is a very rare thing.
Yeah, 100%.
Which is the same for everybody. And I think there's a weird thing there sometimes with not just bi people, but queer people in general, that there's an assumption that you're going to be attracted to everybody. And you see that sometimes with gay panic among men, right? That they assume, oh, if a man's gay, he's going to be hitting on me.
Like every single guy that they see, they're asleep.
Yes, they're just ravenously, and bi people are just ravenously chasing after everyone that they see, which is so odd.
It's seen as predatory, right?
Sometimes.
But is that how society casts us, Because like I've even felt like when I've come out to my male mates, I've felt the need to assure them that I'm not attracted to them.
Really?
Even if I am.
Wow.
Because I don't want to risk the friendship.
Yeah.
Because, I think most people, particularly those who, aren't involved, I guess, in the community and don't have the education and an awareness that we and other people might have, they do tend to hypersexualize it and just think, oh my God, like my mate that I've been friends with for 20 years has just told me that he's bi. Is he checking out my ass? Is he this? Is he that?
Who cares if he is?
Well,
I mean, how many
do though? That's the thing they do.
How many of us women have male friends that potentially are checking us out? It's just a standard thing, but
Well, it is for you two because you're both absolute smoke shows. So.
I will not argue.
Well, thanks, Bridget.
But I guess that's a whole other topic, isn't it? Because that's that fear of the feminization that often is part of homophobia. That men perhaps fear being put into that position,
Fear being predated on.
women are put into.
Isn't that interesting? Men fear what they do to other people all the time more than anything. Being a young guy going to gay clubs for the first time and having very gay men predate on me was really, really eye-opening, and it really quickly opened my eyes to what it must be like to be a woman and have that non-stop. It's not a comfortable feeling at all.
I must say, though, when I was about 17 or 18, I took two straight guy friends of mine to Connie's, and one of them in particular loved it so much. Within about 5 minutes, he had his shirt off. He was up on a table, surrounded by about 10 guys. He was living his best life. And he was totally straight, but he just loved the attention. And so I guess it can go the other way as well.
I may or may not have found myself dancing in my underwear on a box at Connections in my 20s once or twice also.
And you also enjoyed the attention there, did you, Aries?
Absolutely. And let's go to, I think it was a really good time to go to a break, and we'll pick that up in a minute.
DRN1, your favorite radio station, playing the independent songs you love right now.
I'm feeling alive. It's not a phase, it's how I thrive. It's love I see.
Welcome back to the B-side. Just before the break, we were talking a little bit about how we individually identify and label ourselves. I think we heard from you already, Aries, but Bridget,
You're done, Aries. Yeah, I identify as bi just because that was the label when I came out. There wasn't really something else in common parlance. I didn't think about it too deeply. I wasn't straight. I wasn't gay. I was bi. Since then, when the label pansexual started to become a little more known, I did think about, well, maybe this is a way I should describe myself. It perhaps seemed to better fit in the sense that if you assume that bi doesn't include everything and pan potentially does, which is obviously a controversial idea, but certainly thinking about my own attraction, as I think I mentioned, very much in the middle of the scale or even all over the scale.
So you are definitely multi-gender attracted, not just masculine and feminine.
Definitely, and multi-person attracted. I've sat with it and thought, trans man, trans woman, non-binary, a masc person, a femme person, an androgynous person. Is there anyone that I wouldn't be attracted to? And the answer is no. I don't really have a type. I've never had a type. I've always just met a person and thought there's something about them, and sometimes I can't identify what it is. They're not necessarily conventionally attractive. They might be a bit weird or unusual.
Aren't they the best kind?
Yeah, perhaps. But I've often found it's really hard to say. What is it? What is it about somebody? And it certainly has nothing to do with them being a man, nothing to do with them being a woman. I love people that are androgynous. I find that super hot.
I'm actually really attracted to androgyny too. Like, I find that super attractive. How about you?
Make that 3.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, there's something about, but then there's also something about someone who's, I guess, performing gender really well. Do you know what I mean?
100%
A
agree.
really femme, beautiful woman, or a man who's kind of doing that thing, maybe wearing like a lumberjack kind of outfit.
Have you been watching those videos?
I may have. I mostly just watch 80s movies. But I think it's just there's something about somebody just doing something well and embodying who they are in whatever.
See, that's an energy,
way.
right? Like, it's just owning your skin, owning who you are as a human being, irrespective of how it looks, but just being really comfortable in yourself. Like, that is sexy. That is attractive.
Yeah.
And I do think there are things outside our understanding at play. There are things in our biology that we don't always consciously recognize. There's some research that's a bit questionable about pheromones.
Yep.
So we may be attracted to people because they feel, and going back to the idea of safe, that people subconsciously somehow feel at home. They feel
Yep.
safe. And so I think, yeah, but sorry, I got away from labels a little bit there. Bottom line is I do generally identify as bi, but to be honest, I don't really care. I know labels are very empowering for a lot of people. They give them a place to feel at home. They know where to situate themselves, but it personally doesn't really matter to me that much. It's just a word. It's a word of convenience, but I don't really feel any particular attachment to it.
Yeah.
And Marie?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you've just been saying there, Bridget, is really interesting because I guess sort of being in that space where, you can be attracted to everybody, potentially, any gender. Sometimes people do kind of call that pansexual, but for me, bisexual fits just as well because I still feel like I have a preference to a degree. So it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not open to every gender, but I know that I have a slight more preference to like feminine kind of energy, and that could mean trans feminine, that could be, all sorts of different kind of, expressions of that. But yeah, so for me, like I have kind of played around with the label of pan, but because it's kind of not necessarily seeing gender at all, or that's the way I interpret it at least, it didn't seem to fit quite as much because I still definitely do see gender. It's not necessarily what I'm primarily looking at someone, in terms of whether they're going to be a, potential, romantic or sexual partner though. For me, you were sort of talking about pheromones and just feeling it and that kind of thing. For me, it's energetic. For me, it's about how I feel in that person's energy, the safety, that kind of feeling of being met emotionally. All of those kind of things that it really makes for whether I feel like there's that connection that I would want to take that further and into a sexual connection.
And sometimes back in the day, before I was in a long-term relationship, I would find I would meet someone and I would just have a feeling of, I want that person to be in my life in some way. And it wasn't necessarily, I didn't know quite how yet. Do I want to be sexual with them? Do I just want to be friends with them? What do I want? I don't quite know what I want. It's been a theme of my life. But
it's very bisexual of you.
It is. But I think there's that, just that I want to have a connection with this person. I haven't defined that yet, but I want to know them. There's something about them.
That's one of the things I guess that I love about polyamory is that, we, even in the context of a relationship, we can explore those connections that come along to their organic, like their natural organic conclusion. Like we don't have to necessarily choose what someone is going to be to us. We can just feel that feeling that you're talking about where, you're sort of like, because I have that too all the time too. It's like, I know I want this person in my life. I'm just not sure how yet. And if I was in a, hetero relationship, I wouldn't, and a non-poly relationship, mono relationship, I wouldn't be able to pursue even the friendships often in those kind of relationships, whether it's with a male, female, or, or anywhere else on the spectrum.
Well, I mean, as bi plus people, we can potentially be attracted to everyone. So everyone is a threat in some ways. So like, if those...
Or a promise.
Oh, yeah. No, but like, to a partner, if, they're kind of concerned about you developing romantic relationships or sexual relationships with other people and you're attracted to potentially every other gender, at what point do you kind of say, no, that person's just a friend because I'm not attracted to them? Potentially it could be anybody.
Yeah, but you may be attracted to them as a bowling partner or as someone to go surfing with or as someone just to have intellectual conversations that maybe your current partner can't match you with.
Yeah.
I mean, you, for instance, you love your art and culture, right? And that's not ever really been a big part of my life and my experience. And while I'm always open to going and doing those things for you, you tend
hate it a little bit.
I don't hate it a little bit. It's just not high on my priority list, So you have friends.
Yeah.
And sometimes these are people that you've actually met on dating apps that share that interest with you, and you go and do those things with them instead of me. And I'm absolutely okay with that, as I think everyone should be, because I think that is really healthy and normal, whether it's, whether romance and sex is involved or not.
I think, yeah, totally agree. I think, you're sort of saying the benefit of, being ethically non-monogamous, and allowing connections to form into whatever you want them to be. You can be attracted to people in a whole different range of ways and just
Like the
let it be
spectrum.
whatever it is, right? So, yes, it could be, romantic or sexual. We kind of know what those kind of things are. It could be emotional, but without the sexual and romantic. For some people, it could just be aesthetic. It could just be intellectual. It could just be sensual, where you just like really love hugging and cuddling with that person, that kind of thing. So yeah, like there's lots of different ways, and it could just stop at something that is platonic. And I think something that does tend to happen in these sorts of situations, and you talked about, some of my closest friends actually having met them through dating apps, is, you meet them sort of with the intention that, it could be anything, but not expecting it to be any one thing at all, and just letting it become what it is. And they become some of my strongest, most beautiful relationships, but I would term them to be queer platonic rather than actually anything that's sort of sexual or romantic or anything like that. They're entirely platonic relationships, but so fulfilling for what they are. So it's nice having that flexibility to
Yeah.
be able to
And
pursue that.
while you don't have any intention for those relationships or friendships to evolve into anything else, there's nothing to say that they couldn't either over time. Now, I know with your current group of friends, there's not anyone in there that you uh, have that wish or that desire or that sort of belief that that's going to happen. But I guess just talking hypothetically, like this is the beautiful thing about, I guess, our relationship, is that those things can evolve organically over time if that's organically where they go.
Yeah,
That's absolutely okay too.
but it's such a mutual thing too. It's about those two people that are
Yeah.
in that relationship. So it's also about respecting those boundaries. If one person only really wants a platonic relationship, then that's what it is.
Yeah.
So even if you do find that person really hot, like platonic is good too.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think there's a really interesting point there about letting relationships be what they are and having, and I guess this comes back to what we're saying about being bi and beyond the binary and beyond different binaries. There's nothing that makes me sadder than this idea with straight couples sometimes that a man can't be friends with a woman, or a woman can't be friends with a man, or you can't be friends with your ex because there's a threat. And I think it's just so sad to me, and it's taken to extremes sometimes by some very traditional, sometimes religious. I remember reading about the former vice president of the US, Mike Pence. He was never alone in a room with a woman who wasn't his wife.
wow,
Imagine thinking that every woman is such a sexual threat that you can't be alone in a room. It's just,
it's a little bit worrying.
it's really, really sad. And I think queer relationships, perhaps because they've always had to be different, there's so much space there for allowing that connection. It's not you're in love, you're having a romantic relationship, or nothing. And I think there's so much there that's quite interesting. And it also raises a lot of questions of what is love? So if you're poly, is the goal then to be in love with everybody, or are there different levels of that?
I think for me, it's about the potential that it could become love, but not necessarily expecting that it always will. So I think the ultimate goal is to be open to multiple loves. But for me at the moment, I just love a lot of my friends. So that's love too.
And that's love
right?
too. I think it's,
Yeah.
what,
And obviously I love Aries. So we won't forget about it.
Feeling is very mutual, my love.
where is the line? I think it is an interesting one, and it's one that perhaps bi people think about more because we have that potential to be attracted to multi-genders, that perhaps we think about it more. Whereas I suppose if you're straight, you already have roughly half the population that you're kind of going, okay, well, I don't need to think about them in my calculations. But yeah, I suppose when anybody could be someone that you're potentially going to have a relationship with, it does make you think about, where is that line? Where does friendship become another kind of relationship? When does it become love? What is the difference? Is it about sex? Is it about feeling that you can be intimate in an emotional way?
I'm really interested to know, Bridget, because you're the one of the three of us that's in a hetero presenting, monogamous relationship.
Definitely not heterosexual though.
23 years and counting.
Yeah. Do you ever feel, I don't want to say less bisexual, but do you ever feel like a part of you has had to take a back seat now? Like you don't get to explore that? I mean,
Sure.
because I'm like, we're
Sure,
poly,
but
right? So if,
I think I'd feel that way if I was straight too.
yeah,
I think there's also just an element of, if you choose that path of marriage or any long-term monogamous partnership, and I personally don't think that it might be valorized in our culture. I don't personally think that it has any more value than having multiple relationships that rise and fall, or multiple intersecting relationships, or letting a relationship live a certain time and then die a natural death. We have a whole narrative of, you failed. You failed if your relationship ended. And even when people have been in really long relationships, we act like it's some tragedy when people get divorced, when they split up, instead of just, maybe this is great. And it doesn't invalidate what they had previously. It had a life, it had its natural life, and then they parted. I mean, I don't want to sound like Gwyneth Paltrow and conscious uncoupling and all of that, but I think there's nothing intrinsically better about it. It's a path. Everything's a path that you can choose. But I do think if you do choose that path, of course, it's a trade-off. You're making trade-offs. So if you're a straight person, you're going to be making the trade-off that you're not going to potentially have any other connections with the opposite sex. And if you're a bi person or a multi-gender attracted person, there's, I suppose, an additional trade-off, but only in the sense of, do you consider every man the same as every other man? Do you consider every woman the same as every other woman? Because there could be someone else out there that could be amazing, but that could be a man or a woman. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
Why don't we take a break and we'll come back and talk about this more?
DRN1, your favorite radio station, playing the independent songs you love right now.
I'm feeling alive. It's not a phase, it's how I thrive. It's love I see.
Welcome back to the B-side with Aries, Bridget and Marie on DRN1 Radio. Bridget, just before we went to the break, you were sort of talking about your experience being bisexual in a monogamous hetero-presenting relationship, and I'm really, really curious. I've got so many questions about this because I guess as a poly person, I would feel stifled, but your experience has got to be different, right? So I'm curious to know if your bisexuality has been in the conversation from the very, very beginning, and what conversations you might have had and might still be having around your bisexuality with your partner, with your husband
My husband, yes.
of 23 years.
Married for 20, together for 23.
Yeah.
20 this year, actually.
Solid effort.
Next month. Thank you.
Congrats.
He's known that I'm bi since, I think, the first week, possibly the second time we met.
So it really has been a big part of your identity for a long time. It's
Oh.
not something that you've kept hidden.
I was not hiding it at all. I was right out there with it. And there was a very brief time back in the mists of time when we first met where he did perhaps find it a little confronting, just in the sense of, I remember he said something along the lines of, I have to worry about everyone now.
Yeah.
He was jealous. He did experience jealousy, but that lasted not very long at all. And now he's incredibly supportive. And I've asked him about this because, of course, I'm on the radio, I'm talking about different things. How do you feel? And he thinks it's great. He thinks it's great that I'm out there. So I think he understands. It would be pretty sad if after 23 years you can't feel comfortable. I think He knows who I am. We know each other well. We know our relationship well. And yeah, it's all in the same way that if you were in a straight relationship, it's all about trust. It's the same.
Yeah. I mean, I think as a guy, I think I can speak for most men when I say that we have this fantasy of being with two women, and I think he's missing a really big opportunity.
Honestly, I think he'd just find it tiring. It's just
No,
too much
I mean,
to deal
Too
with.
much effort.
Yeah, and he'd probably be worried that
Your
the other one would
fantasy's
be
in one
like
head.
me. He'd have two people talking all the time. Nah.
Maybe that you'd like it more too, Bridget.
Who knows? Who knows? I think it's maybe a conversation to be had, but certainly not on the radio.
You're no fun.
I am no fun. That is 100% true. I am the opposite of fun.
I don't believe that for a second.
So moving on.
We love you, Bridget.
So we were going to need to finish up pretty soon, but there's a lot that we haven't had a chance to get into. And we've been talking about labels, we've been talking about identifying as bi, pan, multigender attracted. But it is really important, I think, that we acknowledge that there are other cultures that have completely different ways of thinking about this. And there are other cultures that have long recognized genders outside the Western binary in aspects such as two-spirit or brother boy, sister girl, many, many other examples. And this is something we can't really get into too much as we don't have the lived experience. But in the future, we're really hoping that we can discuss the experiences of people from other cultures. And we'd really love to have some guests on who can speak to these other different non-Western cultural ideas.
Yeah, because we talk about this a lot, right? Like, we don't want this show to be just about us. It's not just, we're not here for us. We're actually here for the community, and we do really want to hear from all facets of the community about how they experience attraction and sexuality. And so it would be fantastic to have some people from some other cultures give us some insight into what's normal, what's present for them. Yeah.
And I think it's also about recognizing that, we are coming from a very privileged place where we're three cis white folk that, don't necessarily have that same experience as what a lot of other people do have. We do, exist in, a sense of privilege that some other people don't have. So we definitely do want to have people on that can talk from their own experiences, and we want to be able to understand that more because we can't speak to that experience, and we would love people who can. So yeah, please definitely jump on and find us either at Bi Plus Community Perth on the Facebook page, or you can email DRN1 as well to actually come on the show as a guest. We would absolutely love that.
So this evening, we've talked about being bi plus beyond the binary. We've talked about how attraction can manifest and the different aspects of that, whether it be sexual, emotional, sapio. But there's a lot more there, and I'm certain that in future episodes, we'll be coming back and delving even more deeply. So I hope people will stay tuned and come back to the B-side to visit with us again.
Bye.
The B-Side Radio Show is made in partnership with Bi Plus Community Perth and DRN1. Have you got a Bi Plus question that you want answered or a topic you think we should cover? Email the B-Side at drn1.com.au. Don't worry, you can stay anonymous. Do you like this show? Check out more of our LGBTQIA+ shows at drn1.com.au.